Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the top 50 greatest games of all time. This is part 4 of our series, and this is episode number 298, which is usually what I say first, but here we are.
It's a new year.
Hello. Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we already had one this year.
Yeah, you actually we really emphasized the back there, Neilan, but we just recorded last week. We just had an episode last week,
It
so
was
why
yesterday.
emphasize it?
It was seamless. Yeah, exactly. This has been a non-stop parade of just recording episodes every single week. It's been...
That was a weird thing for you to say.
Yeah, very, very odd. That said, how are you both doing in the new year?
I'm still, so peek behind the curtain, we have not recorded in a couple of weeks. We're back to recording. My fellow hosts are agape at the idea that I would reveal that. The peek behind the kimono, as Kellen likes to say. But yeah, we were off for...
said that.
We were off for a couple of weeks, and we are... We are back, and as I just revealed there, I still have this nagging cough. Kellen, Christina, when she got sick at PAX Unplugged, you said the cough lasted for a while. Oh, and Neilan has something to say.
I was going to say, I've had this nagging cough most of the time I was in South Africa. It's only really in the last week that it started to subside, and we kind of all picked this up at around about the same time at PAX Unplugged.
Christina still has it. So.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and mine's intermittent. Like, I will sometimes, like maybe once or twice a day, still just have the weird little tickle in my throat from it. It's very bizarre. I don't know what it is. I kind of feel like since I got COVID, I've kind of had that anytime I have some sort of like coffee disease. Like I feel like the last time I got sick, I kind of the same thing. The cough just lasted forever.
Coffee disease? Is that like a cappuccino?
Yeah, exactly. Any sort of caffeine related illness. But yeah, it's been weird.
Yeah, it's really annoying.
You guys think that someone tuning into this podcast, you've done this 298 times, right?
Uh-huh.
You think this is
297. This is
people are paying for is to hear you two make coughing jokes before getting to the games?
In the new year, we're trying to like a whole the whole dad, a subtle, soft, not subtle, I guess, very obvious but gentle humor. That's what we're trying.
Right.
to
Yeah,
right.
We're wearing off the edges.
We talk about our feelings and what beverages we're pairing with each game.
That's right.
More than
Exactly.
the games.
That's right. Exactly.
That's the plan. Starting off with... Should we just go right into it?
Doesn't matter to me. Sure. I saved 2 lives over the last couple of weeks.
Wait, what?
Yeah. But I don't know if I should say that for the bonus episode.
I mean, you definitely need to give us more context than that.
There were 2 fellow animals, not humans, but two other animals. And I saved 2 lives. What's the big deal? It's a normal day for me.
Leave that there as
Squishmallows.
Okay, let's just get right into it with this week's selection, which is going to be our 20th to 11th
Into it.
favorite
What is
games
this?
of
A
all time.
financial company?
What?
He said, "Let's get right into it." I said, "Into it." What is this? Like a
Terrible.
He saves
is
2
the new
animals
year.
and he's cosplaying as a dad.
That's right.
Okay, we are going to kick it off with Kellen at number 20. Tell us about your 20th favorite game.
The 20th best board game of all time is Cosmic Encounter, and that is irrefutable. This is the premier negotiation, alliance, backstabbing, silly game that gives you flavors of Magic the Gathering, real alliances, real opportunities for stupidity and hilarious deal-making, while also giving you a interesting game of hand management. Cosmic Encounter has been around for years and years and years, made by the people who make Dune, and Fantasy Flight Games has an amazing edition currently out with tons of expansions, tons of aliens. This game has been my number 1 for many, many, many years, though I'm not that old, so there's less manys possible for me. Probably the least manys possible amongst the dads here. And it has only fallen due to lack of play. I love Cosmic Encounter. I could never see myself parting with it, and I think that on a list of like sentimental favorites, it would probably be like the second to last game I got rid of, or potentially even the last game I got rid of, because it is so seminal to my board gaming experience. This is one I just need to get back out. They keep making new expansions for it. I keep buying them. I have played it recently, but not in any major way. Cosmic Encounter, really, if you're looking for a game for gamers where laughing is the currency and alliances are the game. You can't go wrong with Cosmic Encounter.
Yeah, I think it's telling, even in my case, that like this being one of the first games I bought when I was new to the hobby, and I still own my copy of it. Like, I can't bring myself to get rid of it. It still holds such a unique sort of it's such a unique play space, and one that I just kind of feel like I would be lesser to lose in my collection.
Yeah, and I think, it may be one of the only games not touched by the dreaded euro. If you want to go like what is a euro and what is not a euro, you can look at Cosmic Encounter. It's in the dictionary definition of not a euro. You know it when you see it.
That's a pretty good definition. I like that because you start thinking of every game has Euro aspects to it, and then you think to yourself, okay, if all these games are like quasi-Euro, have Euro elements, like what is an example of a game that is not a Euro? And one of the first games I always think about is Cosmic Encounter. It's funny that you make that reference.
There it is. Pack it up. We don't need the rest of these 60 games. We're ready to play Cosmic. Let's go. Double blind hidden powers.
My 20th favorite game, I don't think is not a Euro. It is Ra by Dr. Rainer Knizia. Ra is moving up a little bit in my list this year, mostly off the back of the lovely new edition of this. I would not necessarily say that everyone needs to get the premium or deluxe version of this new edition, which is elaborate to an absurd degree, but it is a lovely production, even in the regular new edition, which just has lovely thick tiles, player boards that kind of show you where each of your collections go, all that jazz. Ra is at its heart just a auction game through and through. Every round of the game is effectively an auction. Who is going to take the lot? Who is going to wait for it to get to the exact right size of the tiles that they need? Who is going to use one of their 3 bids for the round in order to take that lot at the expense of other stuff that they might be getting? There's an element of push your luck as the round starts to draw to a close. Are you going to be able to get the stuff you want before the round is over? It's just a bundle of great little decisions packed into a relatively short playtime. Lovely, lovely game. I'm glad that more and more people are discovering it, as I did fairly recently. Like, Ra's only been on my list for a couple of years at this point, just by virtue of the fact that I'd never played it. Great game. Really, really great that this is now back in the zeitgeist, as it were.
It unfortunately doesn't hold up to cheating.
I was going to say that Kellen and I had a very memorable game of Ra recently. We won't disclose it on the mainline podcast in fear that someone we know might hear about it, but for the patrons, on the next bonus episode, we will spill the beans. But yes, Ra is a great game. My 20th favorite game of all time actually sort of falls into the Kellen, not a Euro sphere of things. I guess this game has some Euro elements, but I would say it's clearly not a Euro. It's brand new to the list. It's brand new to the world. It was released last year. And to be fair, I've only played it a couple times. But Stationfall is my 20th favorite game of all time. This is a game that I would not have expected to like. For me, when it comes to playing a board game, I do want competitive fairness, for lack of a better term. I just want a game that is like a game. Like, if you get too luck-driven, which is why I don't like some of the latest Cole Worley games. I feel like the luck is a little too prominent in those games, although I can appreciate other aspects of them. But I want a game where you feel like you have control. And Stationfall just walks that line for me. Again, only played it a couple times, so this may fall apart on repeated plays. But I just love how thematic the game is. It does feel like a sci-fi comedy movie in space. The characters are weird, and you've got all these different powers, and you're on the spaceship, and you don't know who's who, and there's like a lot of hidden sort of elements to it. But it almost feels like anything you want your character to do, you can sort of do. The game allows that, even though it's restricted in a lot of ways. You only get 2 actions per turn, and you feel like you can't do that much. But I just remember, like, I had a character in the game we played here at Dice Star West, and I wanted to get to the back of the spaceship, and I was at the front, and you can, like, literally jump out of the front of the spaceship and jump into the back. And just, like, that kind of stuff felt zany in a way that I appreciated. I feel like you're in control of your fate. I feel like if you play the game well, at least, again, my limited plays, that you're going to probably do relatively well, while also acknowledging that there's some luck aspect to it and whatever. But just loved it. I just love how thematic it is. It just felt thematic in all the right ways. So big fan of Stationfall. Looking forward to playing it more.
Need to play that again. Dice Tower West.
Yep.
I think my caution for you, the loyal listener, is that I do feel like it requires a specific type of play or person, which is you have to be outcome independent of actually like winning the game. I find a lot of the like victory conditions, like each character has a +2, -1, +3, -2 for a variety of these conditions that almost makes the scoring like Euro-esque in a way. But like the game itself is so fun and emergent that like it's one of the first heavy games that I'm not convinced needs scoring.
Interesting.
And that's a weird, I like it.
Yeah.
I don't like it enough to, award it all this excellence that you're throwing around, Mark. But it is a very odd duck. Oh, it's me.
Back to Kellen, yeah.
See, the wraparound, I'm always in the position of having to restart this. Do you see?
Yeah,
And that's a burden.
totally.
The engine peters out by the time it
Well,
gets to
actually,
me.
no.
And you have to kickstart it again.
You're also not always in the position of having to restart this, to be
Neilan,
clear.
I heard you say it's always Kellen, Neilan, Mark. So I don't want to hear it. The 19th best board game of all time is called Lords of Vegas. A absolutely essential board game. The best board games have negotiation in them. You heard it here first, and the best board games also have boards. When I think of board games, and I think of that sort of classic sit around the table with a family, with your friends, and there's a board and you're playing a board game, that game should always be Lords of Vegas. Throw away Monopoly, throw away whatever other trailer trash that you've got in your house that you extra copies. Like Lords of Vegas is a game about building a casino, negotiating for cool lots, trying to build up your casino against other people's casinos, and making the most money. The more you expand your casino, the more likely you are to get it taken because you're a greedy. Okay? Lords of Vegas is just, it's an immediate, do you like board games? You're going to like this, except, you got to be okay with Lady Luck. And unless you're a tryhard, Lady Luck will smile for you. You should play Lords of Vegas, the 19th best board game of all time.
This is a double crossover with me earlier in the list. Number 36, I think it was for me. Yeah.
That was what I was going to ask. I couldn't recall from yesterday when you said that. That is a double crossover. What just a fun time. If you just
super fun.
we're just throwing it back, not drinking because we would never do that.
Yeah.
But just throwing it back, hanging out. You're going to play Stationfall, Mark? Over Lords of Vegas?
Double header. Stationfall after a light aperitif, a non-alcoholic aperitif of Lords of Vegas. We all have Virgin Bloody Marys. You know what I mean?
I've
Virgin Bloody
never
Marys.
eaten an aperitif in my life.
My 19th favorite game is one of those ones where sometimes when I'm assembling this list, I kind of just am surprised a little bit by how much I'm moving certain games up or down my list, and Patchwork is one of them. Patchwork is up 7 spots into my top 20. I've been playing it a lot in the last year. I don't know necessarily how or why that came about. I just ended up playing a lot of games with this with a lot of different people on Board Game Arena, and just reaffirming how almost perfect I think it is. It's such a concise, trivially easy to explain game that both marries the stuff I love about polyomino games, the sort of the puzzly nature of trying to perfectly wedge the pieces you have available to you into a very specific tight grid, and also aspects of engine building, the trade-off between scoring and building your resources over the course of the game and getting that arc perfectly right, where you're getting the buttons you need to buy the tiles you need early in the game and then pivoting towards getting the tiles that are going to most maximize your scoring towards the end. It's just such a delicate, perfect arc in a game that plays in about 20 to 30 minutes. It looks lovely. There are a bunch of different editions now that just have various themes attached to them. It is just a constant delight, and I cannot recommend it enough, especially if you have someone that you would like to play games with more frequently who is perhaps not a frequent gamer or closer to a non-gamer. Patchwork always charms and delights pretty much anyone I show it to. I absolutely adore this game, and I just can't imagine a world where I don't have a copy on hand to show to someone that isn't, like I said, wasn't ordinarily a board gamer.
Do you play this often on BGA? out of curiosity?
I do, yeah, and mostly recently. Like I hadn't played it a lot on BGA at all until, like I said, like in the last year, I've just kind of been playing a lot of games of it.
And you found that has sort of like accentuated your love for it?
Absolutely. Yeah, and even like, repeat games with the same person and like sort of just watching the back and forth. And I played it enough now that I'm not necessarily learning a whole lot about it strategically, I would say, but like I'm still just love the play of it, the puzzle of it, the delight of it every single time. It never feels like a foregone conclusion that a game is going to go one way or another. One of the core elements is racing for that like 7-button bonus, and that always feels tense and tight. You're looking at the other player's board, wondering, can they get there before you? How do I eke out the perfect timing of these tiles to make sure that they don't get that before I do? Just lovely. That is my 19th favorite game, Patchwork.
My 19th favorite game of all time is up a couple spots, 6 spots from last year. And this is Glen 2 Chronicles. I love this game for 2 big reasons, 2 things that make it unique. In a lot of ways, it's a standard Euro game, but I mean, that's only insofar as you're sort of gathering resources and converting them. But the thing that makes this game really interesting is, one of my favorite parts of any board game, or one of my favorite mechanisms, I should say, it has a time track. I love games with time tracks. And Glen 2 has a time track. For those who don't know, time tracks are like, in the case of Glen 2, there's a number of tiles that your pawns are on, or your pawn, I should say. Everybody has one pawn. And you can advance quite a bit to grab tiles that you really want, but at the cost of people behind you being able to gobble up the resources that you've passed. So there's like this push-pull of like, should I grab this really juicy tile that I definitely want? But if I do so, I'm leaving all these tiles behind me for people to grab cheaply. So I love that. The other thing is, and this is something that I'm sure other games have done it, but I've never seen it myself, the round-to-round scoring in Glen 2. So there's like 4 resources. They're whiskey, Scotsman, these landmark cards, and something else. I can't remember the last one. But every round, the way that scoring works is that the highest scoring player will get points based on how far ahead they are of the last place player. So if you build these like really big leads, that you score more points. So it sort of encourages everybody to like keep an eye on what everybody else is doing and keeps everybody engaged. Like if somebody's really falling behind in one of these scoring categories, you really need to like let them know or try to rein in the leader, because if they get a big lead, it's going to count for big points. So I like that forced engagement that makes Glen really interesting. It's got some other interesting things, the way that the pawns activate the tiles you have on your personal board. And as the Chronicles thing may sort of intimate, it's got a bunch of modules. This Glen 2, which is obviously the latest version of a previous game, Glen, has this Chronicle system, which I have not dug into, but offers like a bunch of like surprise boxes where the game is, played in different ways. This whole modular expansion thing will be a theme in this set of games for me, but also a common theme is the fact that I don't ever play with these modules. So Glen 2 is the first of a line of games that will fit that criteria. But anyway, even without those modules, which I've heard good things about, Glen 2 is a really interesting Euro game that has a couple things about it that I truly, truly love, and by a master designer, Matthias Kramer. So Glen 2, my 19th favorite game of all time.
I don't know if I've said this before when you've spoken about this, but like the fact that you've not even engaged with those expansions actually is very like encouraging to me, because for whatever reason, when I think about Glen 2, like the idea of like, which of these, the Kellen problem of which of these are the ones I want to be playing with, which are the ones that what would the designer, what would his preferred makeup of this game? That just feels to me like a level of anxiety, for lack of a word, I don't want to deal with. But the fact that you just love this as the base game is cool. That's great.
I mean, the original Glen I don't think had any major expansions, and that game was one that I really enjoyed as well. So again, I've heard good things about the expansions, these Chronicles, but I do not think you need them for sure.
All right, are we done talking about Euros?
Let's get back to the real games.
I didn't say that. Whoa. Kimono man over here. All right, the 18th best board game of all time is called Omen, A Reign of War. There's never been a better time to get interested in Omen, which is essentially my Magic the Gathering replacement. I know many people fall off the deep end and they end up in a hole called Android Netrunner, but for those of us normies, we end up in holes similar to Omen. Omen is a head-to-head, fighting over lanes game with incredibly beautiful card art and units that you are summoning to your side of the field to fight against the enemy. The new version, Smallbox Games, is a small US-based publisher. It's John Cloudis's outfit. And he has recently kickstarted a new version of the game. He got the rights back from Colossal. And so there are 3 games that you can't buy right now, but you probably can soon for very cheap. These are like $11 each or $13 each. Songs of the Far Shore, Banks of the Styx, and Whispers of the Muse. What I like about this is they're little collections, and the idea being that you combine 2 of them and then play a game. So if you think about like a mini Dominion expansion, and you get different flavors with each expansion, and then you just shove them together, and those are going to create different combos for you to play with. If Christina and I are not playing Innovation together, I would say Omen or Reign of War has long been our other go-to, and this is one I would never turn down a game of, and one that I will always have in my collection.
There have been a number of expansions to this, am I correct? Or like sort of quasi-expansions?
There have, and I think this is the reclaiming is happening right now, and the sort of like reducing and creating one thing. That one thing is in the form of mini versions of the game. So like there is going to be a finite amount of them. You could buy one of them, which I don't know how many cards that has, like a very small amount, like 30 cards. But then you could combine 2 of them to make a game, but the game is totally playable with one of them. You can also like get a print and play of this thing for extremely cheap. But previously, the Omega edition, right? If you're looking for one box that you could buy right now, you would hunt down a old copy of the Omega edition, or I would wait for this to be available on smallboxgames.com soon. My
18th favorite game of all time is a new entry for my list and is a double crossover with Mark Stationfall.
Boom!
Stationfall is incredible. I love everything that Stationfall is doing. Like, it has its origins, kind of its like design ethos in video games that I love. Like the idea of an immersive sim as a board game is just so weird. It's so weird conceptually for a board game. It's got so many like weird, bold ideas. It's inventive. To Mark's point, it's a little bit wonky, but it's also like some of the wildest, wackiest emergent storytelling I've ever seen in a board game. I feel like anytime you play it, you're going to come away with a crazy event and a crazy occurrence, some big move, some story arc that defines your experience. I played this very recently at PAX Unplugged with a group of people from the Discord who have not played it before, and everyone had an incredibly funny, great time. There was a very quick narrative that emerged as Caleb, one of the players, decided he was going to take it upon himself to start to blow up the ship, and that could have very quickly been the story of the entire game, but it ends up with another player emerging with a win in a creative way. It's just what an incredible game. There's just like so many just like little micro stories that happen as people make sort of big, bold moves, and it creates an experience that's just going to be so radically different from game to game. I stand by all of the things that both Mark and Kellen said. You have to be okay with not being too precious about a win here, but I do think it's one of those games that does reward everyone trying to win at every opportunity, even though whether or not you win is sometimes a little bit wonky, sometimes a little bit funky, sometimes a little bit arbitrary, depending on the choices of other players. But the moments that emerge from people sort of trying to do their damnedest just to get that little point squeak ahead on their objectives and their agendas is so much fun every single time. I really want to play a lot more of this. I've barely scratched the wealth of characters in the box in Stationfall. My 18th favorite game of all time.
Very cool. My 18th favorite game of all time is, I think, the second instance of a Knizia being referenced on this episode. This is his classic. This is Tigris and Euphrates. It is down 4 spots for me this year, and I think part of the reason is I now play it most often on BGA, and because there's so many people playing it now on BGA, because it's so readily available, I find myself playing with people who really, really, really know what they're doing. And as Neilan has mentioned earlier when he brought up a Yellow and Yangtze, Tigris and Euphrates is a game that can be quite punishing. I wouldn't say like splatter levels of punishing, but can be quite punishing, and the board state can change quite a bit. And when you're playing with people who really are really good at it, especially when you're not a strong player yourself, as I am not, you can find yourself getting walloped. So I think that I couldn't help but have that hurt it for me a little bit, just my dulling of my skills. But whenever I've played it, I have really, really enjoyed it. And it is a game that I have appreciated more in playing it asynchronously, even though I tend to get beat. I do like the chessness of it, even though there is some significant randomness or unknown information, I should say. But the idea that you can sort of look at your board and see what tiles you have behind your shield and try to figure out what tiles your opponent might have and what moves you can make. And in asynchronous play, you can really sort of plan things out and take your best guess, take calculated risks. And when those pay off, they really, really feel great because you really feel like you've deduced something in a way that is not black and white again because there's this randomness. But it just feels like, and I think it probably is, like a classic foundational board game. It feels very close to me to something like chess, like a seminal board game. So Tigris and Euphrates for me, my 18th favorite game of all time.
I think it's only lack of play that keeps this off of my list.
Yeah.
It's like, I know I would like it more. I just can't get to it. And then the people who are pushing for it at game night are like sharks.
Yeah,
who want to kill me.
That's my issue.
They want to lure me in. My 17th favorite board game of all time is a Oink game, but not the highest Oink game on the list. Spoiler alert for myself. This is
Ninja Catfoot?
Insider. No, oh, yeah. No, we're not hawking, we know Mike DeLisio has finally discovered Japanese games, but we've been delivering classics for many years, like Insider, which is essentially 20 questions with a potential hidden traitor. You may have played this game as Werewords. I'm happy if you have played this game as Werewords or as Insider. Again, 80% the same thing. If you've ever played a hidden traitor game and you think about the idea of playing 20 questions with someone who may not be trying to help you, that's hilarious. That's the game. It's just so interesting. Essentially, in Insider, you are trying to determine who knows the word but isn't being helpful, which is a hilarious place to be because you will be saying, no, I asked this great question. And then Neilan will say, no, my question was greater. It's like, that was a stupid question. And so there's a lot of fun arguments that come out of a game of Insider. I love simple social deduction games with twists like this. This could be played infinite amounts of times if you had infinite amounts of words to use, which you can get thanks to the Werewords app. So yes, my 17th favorite board game of all time is Insider the game, and download the free Werewords app. There you go. That's one board game on a list. I'm pulling a Neilan officially.
Yeah, I do think that you're absolutely right in that what is the selling point of Insider and Werewords is just how clever their core conceit is. Like you tell that sentence to someone like, we're going to play 20 questions, but someone's actively working against us. And like that's such a brilliant idea. It's such a perfect elevator pitch for a game that it's kind of no surprise that it always goes over as well as it does.
I remember when this game first came out, and I would take it everywhere, and people loved it, and I loved introducing it to people. And I've since, when it comes to like introducing this game or this family of games to non-gamers specifically, I have gone with Werewords, and I don't even really know why. Do you think, Kellen, that there is, or what I guess is the space that is better served by Insider than Werewords? Is there something like that? Is there like a reason why you'd recommend Insider over Werewords? Because I remember loving it. I remember loving playing it, and obviously it's like very much the same game almost.
It's a little less complicated, right?
Yeah.
And it's also cuter, smaller,
Yeah.
a different type of box. It's not as Werewords, whichever version of it you get, has very Americanized artwork. Like even the one with good art, it's good is subjective. I would say that like if your group is familiar with like werewolf and those sort of trappings, like that's perfect to get the Werewords version. But if you want to increase the sort of novelty of like, whoa, or
Check
just
this
the
out.
weirdness of it,
Yeah.
there's a little bit like Insider's word list is even like kind of esoteric, being that
Yeah.
it's translated Japanese words. So there's just a little bit of otherness that you get there that I think is kind of a unique flavor.
I should
But again,
bring this back out.
I am no longer on the hate train. The hate train has passed. Now that we're 2024 dads. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Congratulations, by the way. My 17th favorite game of all time is Taj Mahal. I just spent a little bit talking about how good Ra is as a pure auction game. Taj Mahal is a little bit less pure, but it is, by virtue of being higher up on this list, my preferred auction game. In fact, of all the games on my list, this is the highest auction-adjacent game that I have. I think the thing that Taj Mahal does so well is it marries two things together, which is it is the strategic planning of seeing the entire map laid before you of all of the auctions that will be available over the course of the game, and then you mix that with just like the intense card of going into a round thinking you're going to go in getting exactly what you want and being screwed by Kellen, who has also been banking up waiting for this auction to roll around, and he has more of the card you need in order to win that lot. Exactly. And I think that's great because I think it just kind of it gives every player the same opportunity to prepare for every one of the lots. And it requires you to not be stubborn, to realize when you're not going to get what you want and back out early, and then sort of double back and prepare for the next best option. It's that perfect match of strategy and adaptability that makes this so much fun for me. It's always tense, it's always fun and funny, especially when you sort of just go into these head-to-heads and you just tell yourself, like, if I just play one more card, I know that it's going to drop, and then he doesn't. That is Taj Mahal, my 17th favorite game of all time, and almost my favorite Rhino Knizia game.
This game teaches you can't always get what you want. Who designed this? Mick Jagger?
Thank you, Mark.
You get that one, Kellen?
Mark, what are you doing?
Taj Mahal is a great game, but it's a game that I don't like because I'm not good at it, and that's exactly why it is not on my list.
Play some more poker, Mark.
My 17th favorite game of all time is up 4 spots. This is a game that really yo-yoed, not that I keep my list dynamic throughout the course of the year, but I could feel it dropping because I have played it a bunch this year, again, primarily on BGA. El Grande. There was a time that I was playing it pretty much all the time, and I sort of burnt out on it. But after a little bit of an absence, made the heart grow fonder, as it does, and I've dabbled back into it and have been enjoying my plays of it again. El Grande is the prototypical area control game. I know that Eric Lang has cited it as an inspiration for a lot of his designs. It is sort of a distillation of area control in a way that I really like, but with some wackiness, some randomness when it comes to the card powers, and some interesting choices when it comes to the way that you play your cards. Everybody has a set of cards from 1 to 13, and when you play a card, nobody else can play the same card, and that sort of determines turn order and also how many pawns come into your reserve. It's a lot of interesting decisions. Like Glenmore 2, this is a game that has a ton of expansions. I have the big box version, which I think is going to get reprinted this year, I heard that. And the big box version has a number of expansions. I've never played with a single one of them. Again, hear good things, but just have never gone around to it. And yet, I really, really enjoy El Grande. I know some people feel like it's gotten stale for them because while the cards that come out can be sort of randomized, they don't come out in any order. They're not tiered or anything. If you play it enough times, you sort of know what cards are available. But that has not been an issue for me at all. So El Grande, my 17th favorite game of all time.
It's one of those ones where someone says they want an area control game. I would assume they've already played El Grande, and if they haven't, it would have to be the first recommend every time.
Sure, yeah.
My 16th favorite board game of all time is a card game. As previously discussed, card games are better than board games. And this is a card game, and that is Fuji Flush. This is Friedman Friese's best game, perhaps the only good game that Friedman has made. And in this game, this is a party card game, which I have such a soft spot for party card games. If you have friends that want to have a party and want to play card games with you, true friends right there. In this game, you are trying desperately to get rid of your hand, and you are doing that by making alliances with the other players, and you play a card and then hope that someone else will also play that same card, because if anyone plays cards higher than what you have played, you must draw another card, and you are trying to get rid of all your cards. I think in terms of riotous laughter in a small box, you can't get much better than Fuji Flush. Get people into this. You could play with families. You could play with anyone who likes to party. And I like to party. And so does Friedman Friese. You wouldn't know it from all the calculating that you do in all his other games, But I can confirm here, Friedman Friese likes to party.
So I assume Fancy Feathers is going to be slightly higher on the list, or did it just get bumped off by Fuji Flush?
Go yourself.
My 16th favorite game of all time is Gods of Atlantis 2. I feel like I spend too much time explaining why games slip down my lists while not celebrating the fact that this is still one of my absolute favorite games. Gods of Atlantis 2 is a distillation of the MOBA genre in board game form. I am unfortunately just playing less and less of it as time goes on. I still think this is kind of fantastic. Like it's such an incredibly smooth design for how bloated games in this genre often tend to be in board game form. I mean, the MOBA genre has been translated to board games over and over and over again, and this is still the one I think that does it best, while still being one of the ones that sort of plays in the most streamlined way. Like I do think that there's a lot of high intense strategy to the way that characters interact and the way of timing your abilities and using your movement around the board as effectively as possible. But the actual game itself boils down to choose a card, reveal that card, activate that card in initiative order around the table. It is dead simple as a system, and the wild asymmetry that comes from all of the characters in the game, which if you are buying Gods of Atlantis 2 is a bunch of characters in that box right off the bat, is just a delight to explore and discover. That is Gods of Atlantis 2, my 16th favorite game of all time.
My 16th favorite game of all time has risen. Neilan just said that he didn't want to talk about games that had fallen, and so let's talk about one that has risen. This has risen 34 spots for me, and this is Chicago Express, also known as Wabash Cannonball, when it was first released, and it was first released back in 2007. It's one of the first Winsome games, one of the first Cube Rail games. And that's basically why I like it so much. I know there's a lot of contenders for best Cube Rail games, but I've come to really, really appreciate just the cleanness and the simplicity of Chicago Express. I like many of the Cube Rail games. I like most of the ones I've played, but I just keep going back to Chicago Express just because of how straightforward it is. There are no powers. There's nothing like that. It's just tough decision after tough decision. It is, shared incentives with the people you're playing against. And, it's not like a complicated map. There's not a lot of stuff going on, but it's just real simple and just full of tough decisions from the get-go, from that first auction. Just sort of everything that I love about Cube Rail games, again, to use a word I've overused in this episode, just distilled to its essence. So Chicago Express, my 16th favorite game of all time.
Trains. That could be a thing, Mark, where you just have like a choo-choo every time you talk about trains. Or there could be like an edit where if someone doesn't want to hear about trains, you replace all discussion about trains with just like choo-choo sounds.
Yeah, but that won't happen though. So why were we talking about something that would never happen? It's sort of a weird thing for you to bring
I think
up.
you've lost the plot on what the people want, Mark.
I'm very attuned to the people. Haven't you been hearing the jokes I've been throwing out there? That's what the people want.
I have heard some of those. The 15th best board game of all time is a card game, and it is Oink Games' best game, and that is Maskmen. This is Taiki Shinzawa of American Bookshop, another game on my top 50. Taiki Shinzawa has become even more famous in our trick-taking renaissance, as defined by, board game content creators, for making Ghost of Christmas, Nine Lives, Big Top. You're hearing his name a lot, but Maskmen is number one. This game is adorable. It is about luchadors. It is a emergent ladder climbing game. I never thought that I would become the... Now, don't let me finish this. There has to be an end to the sentence, because if we stop it there... But
people might take
where someone was describing a ladder climbing game... But they say they called it a trick-taking game, and then they said, well, and then I tried to jump in and say, well, actually, it's a ladder climbing game. And I, half stopped myself, but I still kind of said it.
Right.
So I apologize to you. It's the same thing. Yeah. But what's cool about Maskmen is these luchadors are fighting, and it is emergent what suit is better than what other suit, and that's defined by the cards that people play. This is a weird one. You start playing, and you're like, huh? And then you keep playing, and you're like, wow, there's something here. And it's also a beautiful production, an amazing little box, and just a stunner of a game that only Shinzawa could bring us. Maskmen, it's interesting, like Startups, still in my top 50. Startups has way fallen. Maskmen has remained consistent for me as one of their best games, or their best game. Just an absolute adorable all-around product. Maskmen, I absolutely love it.
I mean, I'm not familiar enough with the whole resurgence of the Trick Taker, but this felt like very early in the wave. It felt like one of the progenitors of this renaissance.
For what it's worth, Maskmen's also my favorite trick-taking game, if that counts for anything. I do think it's
a ladder climber.
Sorry. My favorite emergent ladder climber game. My 15th favorite game of all time is specifically Exit the Abandoned Cabin, but also Exit the Pharaoh's Tomb, Exit the Secret Lab, Exit the Forbidden Castle, Exit the Forgotten Island, Exit the Polar Station, Exit the House of Riddles, Exit the Sunken Treasure, Exit Dead Man on Orient Express, Exit the Mysterious
Are you proud of
Museum,
yourself?
Exit the
I'm getting
Mansion, Exit the
flashbacks of
Horror,
Pokemon
Exit the Hotel
being
Royale,
right out.
Exit the Storming Flight,
You guys
Kellen,
copying me.
why don't you go Pokemon? Go Pokemon right now.
all of the Exit
Zapdos,
games.
Cheating.
They're all great. In particular, I want to call out the advent calendars that come out every year are now my favorite addition to this series and one of my highlights.
Neilan, are
that
you
as a
proud of
favorite.
yourself right now?
I am. I mean that entirely, wholeheartedly, unironically. The advent calendars are excellent. If you want
All right,
an excellently designed little
I
exit
get to
the
cut this
game
out?
puzzle to solve every day of December,
I need
boy,
you to
have
cut
I
out
got the product
Maskmen
for you.
because I got a caramel advent calendar for Christmas last year, and it's my 15th favorite board game that I've ever played.
No, legitimately, they're great. They do the same thing of building on top of each other, each puzzle like cleverly leading to other ones down the line. It continues to be the line of escape room style games that is my absolute favorite. Yeah, there are diminishing returns. There have been so many of them that would be hard for certain puzzles not to repeat and for certain things to feel like you've seen them before. But for every puzzle that feels slightly familiar, there's one that's still going to blow you away with how inventive it is in almost every iteration of this series. Absolutely adore these. Highly recommend. If you've not tried one yet, start off with Exit the Abandoned Cabin. It is fantastic and one of the earliest, and there will be a whole series of these still waiting for you down the line. As Exit the Game, my 15th favorite game of all time.
My 15th favorite game of all time is a double crossover with Kellen. This is Imperial 2030. So this string of games here in this section of the list for me consists of a couple of games that I loved when I first played and have loved for a while, but for whatever reason hadn't played in a bit. But I'm glad to say that, as will be the case with a couple other games on this list, I got a chance to play Imperial 2030 again this year and absolutely loved it. It's like this weird combination between a stock market game and Risk, where there are the nations of the world and you are basically investors in the nation, and if you have the most money invested in them, then you can sort of build up their military infrastructure and use them to expand your profits before you slough off the husk of the nation to your opponent, right after you've capitalized everything. It's a very cynical game in that way, but also just as a pure game playing experience. Just really interesting in the way that players don't take turns, but the nations go in a specific order, and so there's that consideration to make. You don't have to worry about who you're playing after, but what nation you want to invest in, and does turn order matter in that way, and what nations are on the rise, what nations are on the fall, and in that way it's very much a stock market game, but you do have that board presence Risk feeling to it. Just an amalgamation of a couple interesting mechanisms that I've enjoyed quite a bit. So for me, 15th favorite game of all time, Imperial 2030.
What a good choice, Mark.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
It's easy to appear great when the choice before was a Christmas advent calendar.
Yeah, I was very happy about that. I was like, when you're a comedian, you want to go after somebody who's like bombed terribly. And so I felt like, oh wow, this is how Chris Rock must feel. That's what I felt.
Unnecessary.
My 14th favorite board game of all time, I believe, is my highest rated Reiner Knizia game. And because I didn't consult my old list, I don't even recall where it is on my old list, if at all. This is in my mind, the sort of amalgamation of, if you take Through the Desert, which is the preciseness and the classic Go, it's amazing, but it's boring, or it's too boring. If you take Tigris and Euphrates, it's too complicated, and it's too try-hard. And you take Blue Lagoon, which is for babies, then you come out on the other end with Babylonia, which is a 30 to 45 minute amazing tile laying game. Reiner Knizia does these in so many amazing ways. Listen, you could have any of these on your list: Yellow and Yangtze, Tigris and Euphrates, Samurai, Blue Lagoon. I'm happy with all of them except for Samurai because I had one bad play. Aaron, you're an and for whatever reason, Babylonia feels like that new classic for me where I want to play a tile laying game. Babylonia is the right length. Tigris and Euphrates is too much. Babylonia, I can get anyone into it. There's a lot of choices around tempo of scoring early. It does have a significant weakness, which is scoring happens often and the whole time, so you are playing with the score track a lot. But I cannot get enough of Babylonia and just feel great every time I get it out compared to some of the other ones that are sort of receding into the background for me. This is my favorite Reiner Knizia game, Babylonia.
That is a great choice. If you took your favorite Reiner Knizia game and changed it just slightly so that scoring only happened twice and made it slightly more for babies,
Euro!
you get Blue Lagoon!
The 2019 BGB Game of the Year. Lest you
Yes. Don't
Your name is
forget
on that.
that, Kellen.
Your name is on that.
My 14th favorite game of all time. This is my favorite Reiner Knizia game. And honestly, for a lot of the reasons that Kellen just said, it would be hard to go wrong with a lot of the games that Reiner's done in this vein. Blue Lagoon happens to be my particular flavor that I enjoy the most. And I do think that it is, kind of for the reasons I sort of just mentioned. I do like the way that it offsets the scoring to two distinct phases. It gets out of the way and lets you just interact with the game in the short term. But it does offset that by giving a whole bunch of Euro scoring at the end of each phase of the game. I feel like the rule set is a lot more simple to explain than Babylonia's, which again is either that stretches in whichever way you want it to. Blue Lagoon, to me, is the more accessible, purer version of what I want from this type of game. And I love it for that. I've been playing this a fair bit more recently than I had in like the preceding couple of years, and which is why it's moved up my list a fair bit. I absolutely adore Blue Lagoon. I love the way it looks. It's got such a vibrant, colorful art style. And I think it just kind of represents everything that I love about Reiner Knizia. Like pure interaction from simple rule sets. That is also a double crossover with Mark, my 14th favorite game of all time.
And Blue Lagoon survived my very significant culling. So this is no shade. I just turned 12 and decided that I couldn't put it on the list above Babylonia.
My 14th favorite game of all time, again, follows this string of games that I hadn't played in a little while and actually have literally just played this last night. This is Lancaster, up 8 spots from last year. Lancaster is another area control sort of game, but has a couple of really nice touches that I like quite a bit. The first one being that, you are fighting over these spots on the board, and the way you do is you'll have a pawn that's ranked from 1 to 4. That's basically your strength. But you can supplement that pawn with these squires. And so, if Neilan has a pawn out there, a level 2 pawn or a level 2 knight, which they're called, and I want to kick him out with my level 1 knight, well, I have to supplement that with squires. So I might put 3 squires, so my strength is 4 versus 2. But the twist is, if somebody knocks you out of that spot subsequently, you lose all those squires. So it really forces you to sort of like lean into going all in. You have these squires that boost your strength up are sort of a precious commodity. But if you limp in and you just sort of barely win these battles, you find yourself being whittled down. And I like that sort of like brinksmanship and like how Kellen spoke about poker. And there's a poker aspect to the area control here where, you do not want to generally limp into spots and you want to sort of assert your power and have people looking at other spots rather than contesting you. And then the other thing I love about it is it has this law system where every round, one of the resources you have are voting cubes, and every round there will be 3 new laws that are up for being enacted, and there is a lot of bargaining at the table, like, hey, I'll vote for yours if you vote for this one, and this one helps both of us, but it hurts the third person, so let's make sure this one passes or this one fails. There's a lot of table talk, and for like an dusty old Euro, a game that is so engaging, really, really enjoyed it. There has been some people who've complained that the game can get static because there isn't very much randomization. To that end, very much like El Grande, I have the big box version of this, but it's another game where I've never played the expansions. And there's a number of expansions, but again, I've heard good things, but have not felt the need to play it. Just again, a very cutthroat, in-your-face, interactive Euro that I've very much enjoyed. So that is Lancaster, my 14th favorite game of all time.
All right, my 13th favorite board game of all time is the best pure social deduction game ever. Don't let Neilan come in later with any more truth bombs. Resistance Avalon is the best social deduction game to have come out in the past 20 years. That's my review. Let Neilan protest too much later. Resistance Avalon, the best social deduction game of the past 20 years.
I love the Resistance Avalon. You will hear no huge argument from me.
That's the silence. So to separate, give me like 10 seconds of silence. So we get an email saying, why did it stop? Then put that from me. Okay. Done.
My 13th favorite game of all time is Cthulhu Wars. This is my favorite Troops on a Map game. It's probably not as clean as something like a Kemet, but I think what it makes up for in that regard is being big and being bold and being splashy and offering you like a host of different options regardless of which faction you're playing and which factions you're playing against. I think it has a ton of variety, even if you don't start getting into the many, many expansions that are available. In that regard, I think there are a lot of reasons to not be wanting to celebrate Cthulhu Wars in 2024, but it is still the game in this genre that I want to play most. And that is that. That is my 13th favorite game, Cthulhu Wars.
So I wish that my 13th favorite game had been my 14th favorite game, because Neilan mentioned that he just brought up his favorite Knizia, and it would have been great if I had brought up my favorite Knizia right after, but I'm true to my list. Let no man say that I'm not true to my list. So my 13th favorite game of all time is my favorite Knizia. I'm double checking. Yes, that's true. And this is Raw. This is a double crossover with Neilan. And yes, is my favorite Knizia game. It's part of his much beloved Auction trilogy, and obviously is my favorite of them. And again, we had a very interesting game of this, Kellen and I, that we cannot discuss on the podcast. But if you're a patron, on our next bonus episode, we're going to let it all out. We're going to, what is it? You reveal the kimono, or you flick back the kimono, or there's something.
No, I'm not.
Our kimono, we're going to be kimono-less. There's not going to be any kimonos where there normally are, but that's for the patrons only. Very funny play of it. So, but anyway, kidding aside, Raw is a fantastic game. If you like auction games, I would obviously recommend it. And the new edition is beautiful. I would say it's a little, especially the deluxe version, I guess there's a couple versions, is maybe a bit too gaudy and a bit too big. I feel it gets in the way a little bit, but there are plenty of versions out there, and any of them will result in you playing the fantastic game of Raw. My 13th favorite game of all time, up 5 spots.
All right, my 12th favorite board game of all time is the second edition of A Study in Emerald. A Study in Emerald is a game that is actually coming out again in 2024 as Cthulhu Dark Providence. So there will be 3 editions of this game that are worth talking about. A Study in Emerald First Edition, A Study in Emerald Second Edition, and this new one. I think that for whatever reason, well, I know the reason. It's because it's based on a property. A Study in Emerald feels like walking into a world that already exists, or a game that has this like lore or like thing going on, and like you're discovering it, or you don't really get it all the way, even when you play it. It is about Cthulhu. I don't know, Neilan, this is Gaiman, right? He's one of your bros.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the Gaiman story at all, but yeah, it's based on Neil Gaiman, I wouldn't say short story.
About Cthulhu. I don't know. It doesn't matter.
I don't know.
I was making a joke about everyone that's not from America is one of Neilan's friends.
It didn't go as well as my Intuit joke, I would say.
No, it didn't. But in this game, you're either loyal to Cthulhu or you're loyal to humanity. But you score points as if you're on both teams. So you're playing an area control deck building game where you don't know why and how other people are scoring points. And so your score on the score track might actually look really good, but if you've been doing a bunch of actions against your faction, you're going to be in big trouble when the game ends. This is not a very intuitive game experience, and yet somehow it all works together in just this unique blend. I really, really like it. This is my favorite Martin Wallace game. I have still not played a Studying Emerald First Edition. Mark graciously gifted a copy to me. So maybe 2024 is the year of First Edition, Second Edition, Third Edition, if we just start a chant. But in terms of games that do something that no other game does, this is a masterwork, a Studying Emerald Second Edition.
I was about ready to chant. We just moved off that real quick.
We're out of sync.
And this is probably of the games that we've talked about, at least especially on this episode, the one that I'm most eager to try out because I've yet to play it, but it sounds really cool. Have you played, just real quick, have you played that Feld game, the Rose one? I forget it, like the Year of the Rose or something. It's a like Feld's weirdest one.
That's one of his oldest, right? Is it War of the Rose? War?
No, it's something like In the Name of the Rose, I think. So it's also based on a book by, I think, Umberto Eco. But I have a feeling like it plays maybe a little similar, and maybe you'd like it.
Yeah, I have not, but I should look it up.
Yeah. Anyway.
Is this because I'm reading the description, Mark? In this game, players are monks trying to collect suspicion points.
Oh, yeah, baby.
You idiot.
My 12th favorite game of all time is Tzolk'in, the Mayan calendar. I think that the central gimmick of Tzolk'in, which is represented at large by its presence on the board as this giant set of gears that turned, I think it's just so good. Like, it doesn't need the mechanical craft of turning a central gear and having all the other gears turn, but the way that facilitates the game of workers moving along these tracks with their abilities getting stronger and stronger as time passes is just so brilliant. It's a physical gimmick that really facilitates quite well a mechanical gimmick, and it's brilliant. It's both visually appealing and offers something that I up until that point had certainly not seen in a game before. This idea that if you just wait long enough, your workers are going to get better and better and better options available to them. It forces you to think multiple turns ahead, planning out where your workers are going to be 2, 3, 4 turns from now, so you can sort of get the perfect order of placing worker, pulling off worker, getting rewards in what is otherwise would just be a fairly standard dry Euro game. But this mechanic makes it. It turns it from that into something that's really quite magical. I love Tzolk'in. This at one point would have been my favorite strategy game. It is now number 12 on my list. Tzolk'in, the Mayan calendar.
Such a good game. Really, really excellent, and one that I tried for the first few times last year, and just completely shocked me at it's a good Euro game. They exist.
My 12th favorite game of all time did not move from where it was last year, but I can tell you that if we had not played it at PAX Unplugged, it would have definitely dropped because it had been a little while since I played Age of Steam. But we were fortunate enough to play it with longtime patron supporter Leland and a couple of friends there, and reignited my love of it, even though we got stomped. Both Neilan and I got stomped. I think I got stomped more severely than Neilan. We'll have to look it up. But it has a lot of the hallmarks of games I really like. Really tough decisions, really interactive, a lot of choices that you have to weigh where you can, take a small benefit now, or do you want to make like a power move to try to cut somebody off. A lot of tough decisions in terms of how you're going to build up your engine, and there are always trade-offs because the more you build up your infrastructure, it comes at a cost because there's a maintenance to it that is always tough to hold on to. But a game that when it's played well, as it was by Enrico in our case, it just really fun to see somebody who is playing it well. A game that I think lends itself to multiple plays and to sort of like understanding the nuances. And it's, again, reignited my desire to play more of it. It is a game that has a ton of maps. And so if you're a fan of it, you can play it in a ton of different ways. And the maps are not just, window dressing. They often come with different rules and stuff like that. So Age of Steam, a game that I'm super, super happy we got a chance to play again. And I'm looking forward to playing it more in the coming year.
You may not believe this because this is something I feel like gets said a lot. This is number 51 on my list this year. I was really debating pushing it up because I was really, really entranced by that one play of
awesome.
it. And I kind of felt like, based on my experience having played Railways of the World, I knew enough to be like, I like this game, which I normally would not do after one play. Cool. But I really like that play of it quite a lot.
Awesome.
Pulling a mark. 51st. The best traditional Euro game or pure Euro game of all time is Trois. And it's not even close. And I'll tell you why it's not even close. Trois is a tactical Euro game. If you want to try hard it with Lacerda, where you have to plan 20 turns ahead and plan on your own turn, no. In Trois, you are looking at a puzzle, a mini puzzle, of card combos and actions in front of you and having to figure out how to make the most victory points out of them. But the good news is that you don't see all of it at once. Neilan would like it better if you could see all the cards out at once. But you can't, Neilan. You gotta do what's best with what you know now. And so not only that, it's like what cards are going to come out. There are different types of cards, red and yellow and white, that have different types of specialties and actions. But you combine that with a dice economy where you don't know what dice are even available and you don't know what end-of-game victory conditions are being scored. So there is a lot of things to sort of tactically maneuver through. This also has a very polarizing art style. You will either love it or you will hate it. I happen to love it for whatever reason, but it's pretty weird and specific. Trois, a Euro game that I can hold up and say, see, I do play them. I am just like you, Trois. And I'll even play with the ladies of Trois. Come on down. I'll play with them too, Neilan. And actually, I've probably said this anecdote so many times, but Neilan's look of pain, one of the last times we played Trois, made me realize that sometimes you need to bring the ladies around because they're wild and they help make you unlock your engine just a little bit. That is Trois and the expansion, Ladies of Trois. You do not need the expansion. It's fantastic on its own. Trois, the best Euro game, pure Euro game that has ever been created on this planet.
I like Trois a lot. Trois has been on my list in previous years, and I want to play more of it. Like I'm very annoyed by how bad the BGA implementation of this is.
It is. It's hurting it in like hindsight,
Interesting.
Because you can't undo.
Okay.
There's no undo, and a single misclick is just your move locked in.
And it's like confusing how all the dice interact with all the cards. It's not like straightforward.
Right. Yeah.
And so you click, and then you're like, oh, me.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'll click something and be like, okay, where do you want to pull this person from to make this move work? And you're like, wait, what? What do you mean? Right. I didn't mean to pull. And then suddenly you're just locked into like a horrible chain of events that you can't back out of.
It's interesting because
Totally agree.
Because Trois is probably the game where I know that it's a good game. I know that it does a lot of interesting things, and I know that it's very well respected, as Kellen has illustrated here. But it just never has clicked for me. And I was hoping that playing it on BGA would unlock that, like maybe repeated plays I get into it, but it just has not worked. And hearing you guys say that it's not necessarily a great implementation sort of eases my mind a little bit on that front. So,
counter to what Kellen will tell you, one of the reasons I like my next game is because of it has a little bit of a tactical nature to it. Brass Birmingham is my preferred flavor of Brass, and I think that one of the things that's quite brilliant about Brass is it could be a very deterministic logistics game that does get muddied by the fact that your actions are predicated on cards that you have limited control over. Like the locations you can spring up your industry in are not purely at the whim of your decisions from round to round to round. There is a semi-tactical nature to it. But what it gets at the other end of that is every round of the game feeling like, well, what am I going to do with this hand that is best going to help my position in this game of shared infrastructure where I might be trying to get one over on Mark by stifling his development in one corner of the board? Or what can I do to propel my industry forward that is going to help me in this round versus, a best laid plans over the broad strokes of the game? Birmingham is my particular flavor of Bros. I think that is not especially controversial. I feel like that has been a lot of people's takes that have come to the game late, but maybe that's not very fair, because I do think that Birmingham most represents the new reimagining by Roxley in the lovely new altered editions that I think are quite lovely. I do think that the changes that Birmingham makes, I think the addition of beer gives the game a little bit more flexibility. It makes it substantially less harsh than Lancashire is, which, I don't need my 2 to 3 hour long heavy games to also feel like I just got trapped in a corner that I can't get out of. And I think that's the flexibility that Birmingham offers me. I love this game. I think it is so very interactive. I think that it offers a style of economic logistics planning that I just think is unrivaled for my tastes. That is Bros Birmingham at number 11.
Fantastic game. Neilan, have you played Illumination?
No.
I wonder if you would like that. Reminds me of things that you sound like you like in Brass, if you want to look that up on BGG.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I've not even heard of that.
Yeah, Illumination. Look it up real quick.
Medieval monks, Mark.
Woo! Baby! Yes. All right. Let's wrap this up on a high note with my 11th favorite game of all time.
Does this have anything to do with Bros?
Medieval monks, baby. Anytime I can work in monks, I'm happy. Monks 2024. That's the year of the monk. Anyhow, my 11th favorite game of all time, down 5 spots. And primarily, although this is my most played game of the year by a country mile, Race for the Galaxy, I have to admit, I think has taken a hit just because even though I've played it the most, thanks to some of our listeners, including primarily G-Man Avalon, who is on our Discord and a listener, he has been pummeling me in this game and has probably single-handedly been the biggest cause of any overall win rate loss that I have suffered during the course of last year. And yet I love the game. Even though I keep losing to him, I can't help but love Race for the Galaxy. There are a number of expansions, and I would say that after you play the base game a couple times, this is a game where I would definitely recommend playing with the expansions, because it really opens up what the game has to offer. Although some of the expansions can get a little kooky, and I would say mainly stick to the first 3. But Race for the Galaxy is an engine builder, tableau builder that is not as stripped down as Jump Drive, which came after it, but I think it falls in the happy medium where there is planning you can do, and knowledge of the cards and repeated plays does make for a richer experience. And even though I've played it, again, hundreds and hundreds of times, it's a game that I'm always happy to play, just because, every game is different, because, even though at this point I know what cards are available, having to pivot and you only have 12 cards to work with at the most leads to like heavy or intense decision making from the get-go. Also, the fact that it's so quick can only help. Games last 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and so you're even if you have a bad draw of cards, you're on to the next one. And yeah, just a fantastic game. So much packed in there. I know that the iconography is a little bit of a turnoff, but I think after you start playing it a couple times, again, because you can play it so many times over and over again, you get the hang of that pretty quickly, and it's never really been an issue for me. So my 11th favorite game of all time, Race for the Galaxy, a crossover with Kellen.
I just keep meaning to play this with Christina, because I feel like we could go on a run, and then this
100%.
could go way up.
Yeah, without a doubt. I don't know how you don't go on a run. I mean, if you can get over that initial hurdle of the iconography, which can be a little stifling at first, I mean, it's a game where you play over and over again real simply. So,
and that is a wrap for this episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast. We will be back next week with the grand finale, our top 10 favorite board games of all time.
Boom.
Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Please come back next week as we bring this thing home.
I gotta say, if you are here for this episode and you don't come back next week,
Yeah,
what are you
what are you
doing?
even doing?
Why would you
Yeah.
go to 11 to 20 and not 1 to 10? That just makes no
Yeah.
sense to me.
Exactly, Mark. And as always, we want you to sound off on our lists and your thoughts on our lists in our Discord. We would love to hear from you, whether that is in our Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord or on all of our various social media, or you can send us an email at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com and tell us how the Thanksgiving episode had an error in it. We love to hear your emails about how that episode clearly had a mistake that got published. Please keep doing that. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, as always, to Heart Society for our intro and outro music. What's in your mind, kid? Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Neilan, have you ever played Mystery of the Abbey?
You
I
shut
think
up.
that's a game that you should check out if you haven't played it before.
It's a lot like what you were saying. All right, turning this off.
Yep.